So I don't know if you guys, ever heard of the 12 steps, right? The 12 steps, right? What is the 12 steps, right? I was taught the 12 steps was a new thinking process, right? I was taught that the 12 steps was a problem solving process, right? Mind, body, action, right? And then results, I was taught that actions dictate truth, But before we act, right, we gotta recenter, realign the mind, right? And that's where the first two steps come in, The first two steps, right, at any God-given moment, right, we practice. Practice, practice, practice. Not necessarily in that order. With that being said, right, ID problem, solution, right? The ability, right, to pay attention and to focus, right, on what's in front of you, right, is your superpower. There's a lot of distractions. Why? Everything around you is a distraction, right? And our old thinking process, right, stems from how we feeling, right? Mostly that feeling comes from past traumas. And so, before we even pay attention to what's going on, right, the mind might think he know, right? Muscle memory, why? Stemming from traumatic feelings of the past. And so, how do we get over that hump? How do we get over ourselves? How do we get into ourselves to realign the mind once again? We practice the first two steps. Why? A premeditated notion, right, is an assumption. And you know what happens when we assume, right? End result, right, our assumptions consume us once again. And we wondering, what the fuck happened this time? And so the evolution begins, right? It's not easy, but it's possible, right? Because all these pictures in our head, right, is conditioning us to do what we do best, right? Is to assume, right? To come up with situations and circumstances, ideas towards the fact of us thinking, right, we know already what could happen. Breaking it all down, simplifying it, right? Confusing us into the illusion of delusion once again. Preventing us, right? Preventing our superpower from activating, right? To where we can just simply be present, pay attention, right? Observe before we act. So the solution, right, is the problem, right? And the problem is, right, there is no solution, Go figure. The idea is to have no idea. Just sit still and be present. Why? Because if you sit still long enough, right, you get to discover what's really going on. Why? Because every moment is brand new. And so every situation is new, right? We just let it unfold so we can then learn what part we play, what needs to happen, right? What needs to be done. Most of the time, right, we speak before we act, right? As if we know, right? But having the idea that we have no idea, right? We get to participate now, right? Be there, be present, suit up, show up, right? Before we blow every fucking up. You know what I mean? And I'm over that. Wondering what the fuck happened again, right? Me taking out me sabotaging me, right? Simply because I just couldn't sit within me. I'll leave it right there for now. You know what I mean? might be a lot of information that you might have to go over, right? Watch again, right? Think about, right? Comprehend. But until then, right? Just remember, right? If you came to this morning, right? It's only because God loves you. With that being said, don't forget, I love you too. Boom.